On this week's Prequel episode, we follow up on our Murder on the Orient Express listener polls and preview Drive. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. Sorry this prequel episode is a few days late. Katie.
I've been half dead for the past 2 days.
Yes, unfortunately came down with norovirus, stomach flu on Tuesday morning, and we were going to record Tuesday evening to have the episode out on Wednesday, and you've been out of commission until today, really. Like, this morning was the first time you've honestly been back to...
This has been a house of horrors.
Yes, been back to a functioning level. So thank you for your patience. Episode is a little late, but we should not have any delay on the main episode. It should be out on Wednesday like normal. Again, assuming everything goes fine. I, so far, have managed to somehow avoid catching what you had.
I mean, knock on wood again, that has been one of our,
we don't get sick at the same
as a
time
couple.
lately. Yeah,
we've never really gotten sick at the same time.
We got, right when COVID started, we both got, the flu.
Yeah.
But it wasn't COVID because we tested, at the same time. But it wasn't bad. We were both just kind of for a day, and then we were fine. But yeah, we've gotten really lucky about that. Also, norovirus is a little bit harder to catch. I'm a prolific hand washer, and norovirus isn't a respiratory disease. Yeah. I wash my hands a bajillion times a day, which helps with that. So yeah, anyways, hopefully I will skirt it this time because I've had it quite a few times in my life, and it's never fun. But we have quite a bit to talk about. We had tons of feedback on Murder on the Orient Express, and we got our preview of Drive. But before we get to all of that, we're going to give a shout out to our patrons.
I put up with you because your father and mother were our finest patrons. That's why.
We have 2 new patrons this week. First up at the $5 Hugo Award-winning level, John Pauly. Hey, John.
That's our Pauly.
That's Pauly. No, it's a different John Pauly. That is, thank you for supporting us, Pauly. Pauly has been one of my closest friends since high school, was a groomsman in my wedding, and has been listening to the podcast for a long time, but finally jumped on the patron bandwagon, and we appreciate it, bud. Those long nights working at the pharmacy, just doxing all your information. Anyways, we appreciate it. We also have another $5 Hugo Award winner, Ethan Quist. So thank you, Ethan, also for supporting us at the $5 level. We do not know you, but I'm sure you're great because you gave us $5 a month. So if you don't know, at the $5 level, you get bonus access to our bonus content over on patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Every month we release an episode discussing something, usually a movie that is not, an adaptation, just kind of whatever we want. And our most recent episode for January was Dread, and we'll have a new episode out in February for that. So yeah, you can listen, and we have a whole back catalog of stuff we've talked about over the years. So go check that out. On to our Academy Award winners who get recognized every week or every other week during the prequel because they give us $15 a month, our top patron level, and they are Matilde, Steve from Arizona, Paul, Kat Ensminger, Jeff Niederhofer, Teresa Schwartz, Ian from Wine Country, Winchester's Forever, Kelly Napier, Gray Hightower, Eli Young, Scratch, Just Scratch. Shelby says all I want for New Year's is TFIL merch, That Darn Skag, V Frank, and Alina Starkov. Thank you all so very much for supporting us and continuing to support us even when our episodes are a day or two late. We appreciate it. You paid for the Gatorade and ibuprofen that Katie has been taking over the past few days. So, all right, let's see what everybody had to say about Murder on the Orient Express.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Quite a bit. On Patreon, we had 4 votes for the book, 1 for the movie, and 1 listener who couldn't decide. Steve from Arizona said, gonna abstain from this one, mainly because the movie was merely okay, and I'm not a huge Agatha Christie stan. I will say I usually enjoy Kenneth Branagh's scene chewing quite a bit, and his run as Poirot was much funnier than the previous portrayal by David Suchet from the long-running BBC series. I will say I have always been a Branagh fan, and I hope someday you do Much Ado About Nothing, the most interestingly cast Shakespeare novel ever made.
Interesting.
If we ever
Isn't
get
that
around...
the one he shot in its backyard over a summer? I'm pretty sure I remember hearing a story that one of those Shakespeare ones, he like basically filmed in his backyard and cast all of his friends.
I don't know if that's the story of this one.
Okay, I could be.
If we ever get around to Shakespeare, that will be very high on the list because I love Much Ado About Nothing. It's my favorite Shakespeare, hands down.
No, that's not this one. Okay, this is the one with hot
one,
Denzel and isn't it Keanu in it or something? Yeah. Okay, right, that one. Yeah, I think I might be thinking of A Midsummer Night's Dream. I swear I remember hearing this story on somewhere.
Are you sure you're not thinking of the newer Much Ado About Nothing?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't know what you're
I could have
thinking
swore
of.
I heard a story that Kenneth Branagh shot a Shakespeare adaptation like in his backyard over like a weekend or something. I don't know what I'm thinking about.
If it was this one, he has a pretty impressive backyard, but I guess it could be.
I don't think that's it. Well, it's not this one. Again, looking at it, I know this. It was recently. It was like in the 2000s. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, go ahead. But otherwise, I could just be completely making this up. And it may not be anything. Anyways. Sorry.
Yeah, but Shakespeare, I've been hesitant to do Shakespeare because
then you have to read Shakespeare.
Well, no, I don't mind reading Shakespeare. It's because they're plays and they're like made to be performed, and that feels like cheating.
It is hard
somehow.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll get around to that at some point.
Yeah.
By Tove said, I voted yes for the book, though I probably should have abstained since I have only seen the 1970s version and not the recent adaptation. There are a number of things the older version does really well to make all the murderers sympathetic. First, the movie starts with newsreel-style footage and newspaper clippings depicting the Armstrong murder and the emotional toll on the rest of the family, including the deaths or extended grief of people close to all the murders on the train. Also, the final solution scene features the eerie ritualistic stabbing of the drugged Cassetti, allowing the characters to let their personas slip for the only time in the movie. The movie focuses more on how the murder charade is a ruse thought up on the fly to foil Poirot, rather than a coherent plan from the start. I highly recommend watching the solution scene from the 1970s version.
Oh, interesting. Is that so? In the book, is that similar? Like, do they? It sounds like they're saying in the 70s film the whole thing is a ruse thought up on the fly rather than a coherent plan from the start. Is that the vibe you got from the book?
Yeah, they kind of have to, because they're not expecting to be stopped by the snowstorm.
Yeah.
So that kind of throws a wrench in their plans because they're expecting to, they make it ahead to the next stop on the railway station, and then they have that excuse of the murderer must have gotten off at this stop. Who knows where the murderer could have gone, but because they're now stopped by this giant snowdrift, they have to kind of improvise and go along with the investigation.
Okay, because I will say that's not remotely what I got in this film. It seemed like the whole plan, like the tea leaf, maybe not. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Think about it. Just by the way, I figured out what I was thinking of. In 2012, Joss Whedon did Much Ado About Nothing. You say
that was the newer one. That was what I was talking about.
I didn't know.
I just couldn't remember who directed it.
And he literally filmed it in his backyard with a bunch of his friends or whatever. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. Not the Kenneth Branagh one. Anyway, sorry. I know I've heard this somewhere. What am I thinking of? But that's what it was. Anyways, my apologies.
I have never seen that one. If I'm being honest, I don't particularly care to.
No, I can't imagine that Joss Whedon doing... person aside, I'm a fan of Joss Whedon's work in general, but I can't imagine Joss Whedon doing Shakespeare is something that the world needs. I just don't. Again, as much as I enjoy a lot of Joss Whedon's work, I just I don't know.
Our last comment on Patreon was from Mathilde, who said, it would have been hard to decide between the book and the 74 movie, but not with the 2017 one. The book wins easily. It's one of my favorite Christie books. It's a tragic and poignant story behind the motive. The solution is outlandish but makes perfect sense, and it's just the kind of twist that sticks with you. It's also interesting to see morality versus lawfulness being explored, and Poirot's dilemma is the kind of layer I appreciated to see in his character. This recent adaptation annoyed me so much. Agatha Christie basically writes plays and scripts already. It's all there, why would they mess with it so much? It's clunkily made, the pacing is all wrong, and the aesthetic is wasted and doesn't fit the mood of the story. Coming from an experienced director like Branagh, it's even more disappointing. He's also usually doing faithful adaptations, and here there are random action scenes and other additions that do nothing but muddle the story. Most of all, this random backstory for Poirot. Maybe he's getting more self-absorbed with age. In any case, it contributed to removing a lot of the emotion and grip of the story, and that's kind of unforgivable in my book. I was also surprised that everyone gave flat performances. It's an all-star cast, and yet no one sparks. To me, it felt lifeless, and just like they dutifully showed up to do a job. With so many characters, a little energy and ensemble feel would have helped make them memorable and likable. Maybe I'm biased because I've been a huge fan of the 74 version since I was a kid. It's extremely close to the book, on some points even better. There are some hilarious lines, and they fixed Book's weird discrimination of Italians in an equally funny way. He's actually one of my faves in that version. Plus, the whole cast brings it, especially Vanessa Redgrave as Miss Debenham and Lauren Bacall as the grandmother of baby Daisy. I feel like it presents the story very clearly without telegraphing the ending, and it's a satisfying watch. I strongly recommend it.
I think the thing that sticks out to me most in this, in Matilda's points here is, and I didn't really think about it during the episode or while we were watching it, but it totally sticks out to me now because I didn't think about it, which is that I totally agree that not a single performance in the movie is particularly very interesting. Or
Yeah.
like
they're fine.
They're all
fine,
serviceable, but I think it goes back to thing when you have a cast like that.
Yeah.
It seems like you should have it. You should be doing more. The only performance that stands out at all is Kenneth Branagh's performance.
Yeah.
And even that, I guess, is arguable how much you would enjoy it. Again, I think that depends how much of a fan you are specifically of the book or other adaptations or other versions of Poirot or whatever. But he was the one I found the most interesting by far in this movie.
Wasn't that one of, when you read the review quotes in the prequel, wasn't that one of a contention that one of the reviewers had, was that everybody else got kind of shoved into the background?
Yeah, but I think that was specifically more in relation to less the performances and more the script and how little we get in terms of we get more background for Poirot and stuff, and we shoehorn in some backstory and stuff, and so we get to know his character more. At least to me, I do remember that review, but it seemed to me they were talking more about the way it was scripted and how little time characters were given, more so than the performances. But I think it kind of goes hand in hand, because what you're given on the page is also lends into what you can do kind of acting-wise.
And I think with an ensemble cast, it's already hard.
Yeah.
But it kind of gets more difficult when you're elevating one of the characters above everybody else.
And I guess you write a fine line, obviously, too, with you don't want to take any character too extreme or anything, because then you'll get people, especially, fans of the source material and stuff, complaining that you turned certain characters into cartoon characters and stuff. But, comparing it to something, which I think some of our other people do here at certain points, comparing it to something like Glass Onion, because we just watched it a few weeks ago, every single character in that is which also stars Leslie Odom Jr. in a murder mystery. Every single character in that is way more memorable than anybody in this other than Poirot. You know what I mean? Nobody stands out in this one, really, other than Poirot. And a little bit, Michelle Pfeiffer has an okay moment at the end, which is, it's whatever. But comparing it again to Glass Onion or the first Knives Out or whatever, it's just all of those characters are everybody is doing something interesting, and the characters are written in a way that is really interesting. And they all have very, standout characterizations that make them it makes you very quickly understand what their whole deal is.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, you don't really get that from any of the characters. And so I think I would definitely agree in that regard.
On Facebook, we had 5 votes for the book and 0 for the movie. Andy said, when first approaching this case, we think about all the famous Agatha Christie films we've seen, the music, the settings, the characters, and that she was writing in the 30s, and we must expect the book to be indulgent and melodramatic. What a surprise then to read the original and find tight economical prose for the first time and a structure that does away with the conventions of the novel and reads almost like a game. Indeed, the award-winning 70s adaptation clings closely to this structure, preserving the elegant logic and motivation of the unfolding puzzle. In the new film, Branagh chooses emotional beats and character over the mechanics of the mystery. But as the film goes on, the editing becomes more and more haphazard until he barely has a grasp on either. I myself felt great sympathy for Monsieur Brian in his own recap, not having read the original work. The case seems obvious, however. I am of an age where I know what I like and what I do not like. What I like, I enjoy enormously. What I dislike, I cannot abide. Coming back to this story as an adult in middle age, what resonated for me was the human story of the Armstrong case, how a terrible act of violence affects not only the direct victim, but the lives of all those around them. It sends out waves of trauma, guilt, and regret, and makes us come face to face with our assumptions about ourselves, our societies, our morals, and our idea of justice. With my detailed knowledge of the book and previous adaptation as my guide through the muddle, I really enjoyed the new film from that standpoint. However, I cannot lie, so I present you with 2 solutions. On the one hand, Agatha Christie's book rests on a masterwork of logical construction, a high point of the genre, where Branagh's film is full of the fudge. The book is better. On the other hand, the depth or lasting meaning of this human story rests in the case of little Daisy Armstrong and the impact violence has in our lives, which Branagh makes an honest attempt to engage with emotionally, bringing out the real value. The film is better. I will leave this choice with you. Katie is right. I voted for the book.
There you go. I will agree. Very fun there. Good job, Andy. But I will agree that I think that definitely what Branagh was going for. I can see what he was going for by trying to make, like Andy says here, trying to make the moral dilemma at the end and the fallout and the trauma of this murder and the emotional stakes it has for all those people be the point. But I agree also that in doing so, he kind of gets lost in the sauce in the middle to where there's not enough for the mystery to really add up, like the nuts and bolts of the mystery to add up for first-time viewers. And because there are so many characters and because you still have to do quite a bit of mystery legwork, narrative mystery legwork, that you still end up kind of short shrifting the character side to the point where it just doesn't, none of it really adds up.
Yeah, I agree. I can see what he was going for, but it did not pan out.
Yeah.
Our other piece of feedback on Facebook came from Adam, who said, I voted book, not because I have very strong feelings about the book, but more because the movie just didn't do much for me. This might be because the movie had the bad luck of being viewed by me shortly after I saw Knives Out, rather than when it came out. And in my opinion, Benoit Blanc is just a better Poirot than Poirot was. As a side note, the quote Brian was thinking of is an Arthur Conan Doyle / Sherlock Holmes quote that goes something like, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And I have to say, I hate that quote. You know what's improbable, but I can't technically eliminate as an explanation? Magic tap dancing ghosts. So every time I can't explain why something happened, magic tap dancing ghosts did it. Not very good detective work there.
So a couple things. One, we talked about a little bit, but it is tough. And I specifically mentioned in the episode that things like Knives Out and Glass Onion, which are 2 of my favorite movies from the past, 10 years, are standing on the shoulders of giants. And while it is easy to say that because I agree, I prefer Benoit Blanc as a character to my one experience of Hercule Poirot from this adaptation. Again, it's my only frame of reference, and I'm sure there would be tons of people who be like, no, he's so good of a character because of all these, and I get that. I'm not saying that I disagree. I would disagree were I to consume the rest of the Poirot canon. But I think, and I think Rian Johnson would agree. He's very much standing on Agatha Christie's shoulders when he's writing the Knives Out films. But it does make it hard then when you go back and you have a mystery that doesn't feel as sort of compellingly crafted, and the characters just feel. And I think a big part of it in this movie is just that Rian Johnson's a more capable filmmaker than Branagh is, at least to some extent, in certain ways. And I just identify with his filmmaking a lot more, and it just vibes with me a lot better. But that being said, I would agree. I think Blanc's a more compelling character. But getting to your second point, or not your second point, but pointing out the quote I was trying to think of, Shelby also pointed this out on our Patreon feed, or on Patreon, that it was the Sherlock Holmes quote, and I looked it up. I assume that's where it originates. It's from The Sign of Four, which was a Sherlock Holmes story from like 1891. So far preceded this Murder on the Orient Express by, a good 40 years or whatever. So it's very likely that Christie is, alluding to, making a reference to that with that line from Murder on the Orient Express.
Real quick, that was Mathilde.
Oh, Mathilde. Sorry, I thought Shelby. No, Shelby. And then, so Mathilde said it, and then Shelby pointed out that, and this is where I did know it from, because I don't think I knew it necessarily from the Sherlock Holmes story, but what I did know it from is that Spock quotes it in the 2009 Star Trek reboot. And that is where it was stuck in my brain from, because I had seen that movie quite a few times back when it came out. So that's where I was thinking of it from. I half agree and half disagree that it's like not, not a great quote for a detective. Because I understand the spirit of it. I think if you think about it really, like if you hold it as strictly to the letter of the word, or to the letter of the law of what it's saying, you're right that it is like kind of, you can fudge it and make it incorrect, but the point being made, I think, still stands in a roundabout way. I get what you're saying. I get it, but
over on Twitter, we had 9 votes for the book, 1 for the movie.
Just real quick, sorry, I gotta address that just a little bit more. I think the point being that what you're saying is, it's not you can't technically eliminate as an explanation magic tap debts and ghosts, but I think within the context of the quote itself, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. It's saying when you have eliminated the impossible, one of those things you would eliminate as impossible is magic tap dancing ghosts, because that's impossible. So that wouldn't be.
Not everyone would say that that's impossible.
But Sherlock Holmes would, well, depending on the story, I guess, because I know Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was himself a little bit wooey. But point being that people grounded in scientific rationalism would count among the things that are impossible magic tap dancing ghosts. And so then that sort of this idiom would work, because whatever is improbable, magic tap dancing ghost doesn't fall into the improbable category, it falls into the impossible category, and so whatever explanation would have to be something other than magic tap dancing ghost. Anyways, I think that would be the argument I would make to defend that statement, but whatever. Fine, sorry, continue.
All right. On Twitter, we had 9 votes for the book, 1 for the movie, and 2 listeners who couldn't decide. Shelby will go down with this ship said, "It was clear to me that this movie was trying to recreate the success of modern Sherlock Holmes adaptations, but with Hercule Poirot. Making Poirot a sexier, angstier, crabby pants action hero was certainly a choice. They sure made lots of choices, and I guess it paid off because they're making a 3rd movie. I like trains. I wish more of the movie was set on the train and used those interiors. You're adapting one of the most famous bottle episode stories out there. Why do you keep going outside? If I wanted to watch the Polar Express, I'd watch the Polar Express. I would have given it to the book for breaking that rule alone. I also found it silly that the avalanche didn't knock the train clear off the mountain, but I guess that's just the magic of cinema.
I mean, it also depends on the
I know.
size of the avalanche.
Of all the gimmies that
Yeah.
movie asked of me, that was the one that bothered me the least.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta, I get what you're saying, but if it's a small avalanche, it's just enough to dislodge the train, but not knock it off the mountain.
Just a tiny little avalanche.
Avalanches come in different sizes. There are not every avalanche is a world-ending gigantic avalanche.
BRB writing a children's picture book called Avalanches Come in Different Sizes.
That'd be fun. One of them could be the one from Murder on the Orient Express that only knocks the train a little bit off the tracks. I think I see what you're saying, Shelby, in saying that it's trying to like kind of copy the success of the modern Sherlock Holmes adaptations. I will say I don't think it leaned too hard into that. We don't. Because I think I can imagine, or I guess what I'm saying is I can imagine a version of Murder on the Orient Express that really leans into the modern Sherlock Holmes that would be very obnoxious. And I actually kind of like the first Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes. I don't even think I've seen it.
I liked the first one too. I didn't bother with the second one because I heard it was really bad. So,
but I enjoyed the first one. But that being said, I don't think it would work. Maybe it would. I don't know. It's a very different thing. Like it's even a very different thing than Sherlock Holmes. You're just doing like a very But I didn't get the feel that they were necessarily going for that same vibe in this. He's a little angstier. He's a little sexier. Maybe I don't have a good point of comparison necessarily.
I feel like I don't know if they were going for the exact same vibe as like the Robert Downey Jr. or the Benedict Cumberbatch like Sherlock Holmes is.
Yeah, I assumed that Shelby was specifically talking about the Downey Jr. ones.
I do agree that they were kind of like trying to coast off of the popularity and success of that type of incarnation of a detective.
I think to some extent. I think it's more, to me it just felt more so like that's kind of we're just doing a modern take on this, and modern cinema all kind of feels, not all, but like a lot of modern cinema feels similar. I don't know. I didn't get as like not once during the watching of this movie did I go, oh man, this feels like they're trying to do Guy Ritchie's. I think it was Guy Ritchie.
Yeah, it was Guy Ritchie.
It feels like they're trying to do Guy Ritchie's Sherlock Holmes, like at all. But I mean, I can see a little bit here and there. What Shelby's saying. It wasn't the overall vibe that I felt watching the film. I just felt like they were just doing a messy Knives Out. Like that's what it felt like to me. But anyways,
this was pre-Knives Out, though.
Oh yes, yeah,
it was pre-Knives Out.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm not saying that they were doing a messy Knives Out. I'm saying that's what it felt like to me. It's like if you didn't tell me when this movie came out, I would assume it came out like the year or two after Knives Out, and they were just like, "We'll just let's do that," but like. Let's get that same all-star cast of random people, and it's we have a classic murder mystery, and then we have our amazing like it's clearly what Knives Out is. Again, clearly Poirot and all that is what Benoit Blanc and Knives Out is all based on. Is pulling from. Anyways, it doesn't matter.
Totally agree about the train, though.
Yeah,
I think they did not make as good of use of that set piece as they could have.
I think they made good use of it when they were on it. I thought they did some really cool stuff cinematically on the train, like cinematography wise on the train. But yeah, I don't disagree that they. And
I felt like most of that was like front loaded.
Yeah, for sure.
Like they did a lot better in the first half of the movie.
Yeah,
of utilizing the interiors and the last half was like
kind of standard.
Now we're fighting on the scaffolding.
Yeah.
Anyway, Callie Napier said, Poirot was too abrasive in the movie. If I'm going to have an abrasive, slightly OCD savant who's good at solving crimes by being overly observant, I'd rather have Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes. He can pull it off and have his character and still be charming. Branoff's Poirot is just an asshole.
Really? I didn't get that from him. I liked his character. Not that much. I
had zero strong feelings about it.
Yeah, I guess I didn't have strong feelings, but I just didn't dislike him. I thought he was fine. I don't know. That's interesting.
Kelly went on to say, the expansion of the Poirot character was unnecessary.
I will agree with that.
We didn't need Jerusalem to tell us what kind of person he was. We didn't need the apparent lost love either. Also, the addition of the action sequences was ridiculous. So many guns, which is so out of character for the characters. He's Jason Bourne all of a sudden, chasing people through scaffolding. Give me a break. I was also disappointed that so many of the socially unacceptable phrases and words used to describe people of varying nationalities and or race were left in the script. So much was rewritten, it seems this could have been changed as well. I accepted it in the book because there wasn't an option, but it made me bristle hearing it in the movie. To give the movie some credit, it's visually stunning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with a lot of it. I don't necessarily agree that we don't need the Jerusalem thing. I thought that was a fun introduction. For the
that
character.
didn't bother me at all.
But...
And I think like coming from the viewpoint of like assuming that the audience is totally unfamiliar with Poirot.
Yeah, for me it worked fine.
I don't mind having like a little introduction scene to him. The lost love thing was totally it didn't mean
because
anything.
It didn't mean anything.
Didn't
That's
go
the problem.
anywhere.
Yeah, we just don't.
We never went back to it. What was it there for?
My only thought is that they were banking on this becoming a series, and we get more of it in Death on the Nile or whatever. Like that's the only thing that makes any sense. And even then, it's still you need more. If they're going to include it at all in this one, there should have been more to it than just him longingly looking at a picture a few times. Like it just doesn't really add anything interesting.
Paige said, "This is my first time reading Christie or seeing an adaptation of her work, and I have to give it to the book. The book was so much fun. The ending was so delightfully absurd that I was laughing through the final few chapters. I found the movie's ending to be painfully melodramatic. The tone was nowhere near as fun. I preferred how cheeky and laid-back Poirot felt in the final scene of the book compared to his beleaguered and conflicted film counterpart. The one change to Poirot's character in the film that I did like was the implication that his obsession with perfect order was a burden as well as an asset. I thought that it would come back in a bigger way towards the end, especially with how messy and chaotic the case turned out to be, but instead we just get Poirot pontificating about the nature of justice. I thought he might get overwhelmed and frustrated with the conflicting facts of the case and start to make mistakes, but that doesn't really happen. His character just kind of shifts into being obsessed with justice instead of things being precise, which I guess you could argue is the same thing. Other than the tone, I felt like the film lacked the energy this sort of story needed towards the end. I'm hesitant to blame this on Branagh or the DP, as I agree with you guys that they really tried to insert some creative and interesting shots, especially given the limitations of the space that they were shooting in. I think the problem could lie with the editing, but I'd have to rewatch the film to say for certain, and I don't think I'll be revisiting this one anytime soon.
Not much of a rewatcher,
yeah.
to be honest.
I would like to give a shout out to the set decorators and costume designers. The sets and costumes were a visual treat. I hard agree with that. The costumes looked great.
Yeah.
I also thought that I was impressed with Josh Gad's performance in this. He's been in my periphery as an obnoxious Disney comic relief guy, but perhaps that was a little unfair of me. I thought he did a great job with this role and played the character a little darker than I was expecting.
I will say that's the only other performance, and I almost mentioned it, and it's not even that it's particularly like amazing or anything, but it's just that for Josh Gad. I was like, this is like a different thing.
Yeah, it's different than what I've seen from you.
It's different than what I expected coming in knowing Josh Gad was in this movie.
Yeah.
That was the thing. I was like, it's not even like particularly interesting or like, it didn't grab my attention that much, but it being Josh Gad made it more interesting than it could have been otherwise. So I would agree with that. I also agree. I think the point is a really interesting one about the OCD kind of thing that they set up and that not really paying off super concretely in the film. You kind of touched on it, and this is what I would say is like I definitely think that what they're going for, and it's there a little bit in the film, is that Poirot needs things to make sense, to be balanced, to kind of add up, basically, and I think what they're going for at the end is that actually initially he feels like that is going to lead him to, or initially the audience and himself, we think that that's going to be the thing that leads him to siding with quote unquote justice and like not facts be damned, but motivations and stuff be damned. His OCD won't let him not solve this case properly.
Yeah.
But what actually the OCD ends up doing, and again, I'm saying OCD to kind of fill in for he's not diagnosed, it just
right.
that
It's
aspect
kind of
his
implied
character,
by the story, but
yeah, I'm just using it to kind of as a fill in for his overall neurosis or whatever. But what it ultimately ends up leading to is kind of an outcome that we, the audience, and himself even didn't expect, which is once he sees all the pieces and sees how the scales of justice should be weighed here, it's not solving the case the way he traditionally would. The thing that makes this even, quote unquote, is nobody going to jail for what has transpired.
Yeah.
So I think it kind of works out. I will agree that it's not maybe quite as, I don't know, perfectly executed as you could do it. But that being said, I think it's handled in a way that I thought was, and again, it was the most interesting part of his character and the story to me was that resolution with what is justice, what is Poirot, how he views justice, how he views cases and all this sort of stuff, and what he ends up deciding to do ends up being the most interesting thing in the movie. And I think it could have been handled worse, but it also could have been handled better. So
our last comment on Twitter was from Catherine Shields, who just responded with a picture of the Masterpiece Mystery version of this story.
What is that? Is that the BBC?
Yes, I believe that is
Okay.
like the BBC PBS property.
Yeah.
Which I am assuming is their way of saying that is the preferred adaptation.
I would assume. I'm scrolling through IMDb to see if the casting has the person mentioned earlier, and it doesn't have any casting. Why does this not have any casting? What was that guy's name? Yeah, it's this one. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's the BBC version, which is, I think in the US it airs under
that's like the Masterpiece
Theater on PBS or whatever, but yeah. All right.
On Instagram, we had 4 votes for the book and 3 for the movie. Anal Fracture 42 voted for the book and replied, just a classic.
Just a classic. 3 votes for the movie and nobody coming out swinging for it.
No, nobody came out swinging for the movie here. I have some thoughts on that, though, when we're done with all our feedback.
Okay.
On Goodreads, we had 2 votes for the book and 0 for the movie. Mecky Ains? Maybe.
I'll take it. I don't know. I don't know how else I would pronounce that.
Mecky Ains said, finally made it through the backlog of episodes for properties where I have read the book and seen the movie, so I can make comments. The book is way better than the 2017 version of the film. The tragedy here was wasting your time on the lesser of the movies, especially since several of your issues with the film, additions for the sake of the film medium and trying to make it more actiony / exciting, do not exist in the 1974 version. Still an absolutely star-studded cast, and they deliver top-notch, even Oscar-worthy performances. Albert Finney's Poirot was much closer to the source material, a character that Agatha Christie said is, quote, a detestable, bombastic, tiresome, egocentric little creep. Kenneth Branagh is far too adorably irritating to really be Poirot. And I get it, you don't really want to have a main character that is like that. He isn't a likable character. I've read several of the Poirot novels, though, and it is completely not the correct characterization. Hang on. I've read several of the Poirot novels, and though it is completely not the correct characterization, my favorite Poirot is Peter Ustinov.
They're saying they've read several of the novels, and even though Peter Ustinov's version of Poirot isn't exactly accurate to the novel version, it's still their favorite version.
That took me a minute because my brain kept wanting to flip
I was
words.
doing the same thing, reading it, trying to figure out. It was just, yeah.
However, favorite Poirot aside, and just comparing movie quality and fidelity to the novel, the 1974 version of the movie is excellent and superior to the 2017 version. While on the subject, I think the 2022 Death on the Nile ever so slightly edges out the 1978 version. The very interesting cinematography pushes the 2022 to the lead. I would have a harder time choosing the book or movie with the 1974 version. I think the movie might get it because the characters are brought to life so well and minor changes don't bother me. Brian mentioned Knives Out and Glass Onion. I love Benoit Blanc and think he is the perfect, likable reimagining of Hercule Poirot. That foghorn leghorn accent is the perfect effect to bring forward all of Poirot's annoying traits, but make him not as detestable. And despite my fondness for Agatha Christie's properties, I'm more excited for the third film in Rian Johnson's series than Kenneth Branagh's third installment. Keep being awesome.
I mean, I would agree with that, although I haven't seen Death on the Nile.
Apparently it has interesting cinematography, though.
It's funny because the only thing I've seen from that movie is people bitching about the CG on like Twitter.
I have heard literally nothing about that film.
I didn't either. The only thing I've seen is somebody making fun of one of the opening shots, like the CG in it, because like it's lit in a way where like there's light sources coming from really wrong angles. I don't know. I've seen some people complaining about some of the, but that was just one shot, like from whatever. I'm sure there is lots of other interesting, cool stuff in the movie, but yeah, I don't know anything else about that one. When we do these episodes where we have our audience vote, we do whatever the audience says, and if they pick the 2017 one, we do the 2017 one. We had lots of people very adamant that, lots of people wanted us to do the 1974 one, and that it's their favorite version, as you've heard throughout these comments, but that was not where the numbers landed on the polls, so...
Our last comment on Goodreads was from Miko, who said, I may have gone a little overboard with this one. Not only did I watch the 2017 film, but also the 1974, 2001, and 2011 movie TV adaptations. I'd rank the 2017 film the worst of the bunch, even under the generally despised 2001 Alfred Molina version. Why? Because at least that functions as a detective story you can follow along. From what I have seen from Branagh, he is generally an okay director. I say generally. Had I money, I'd support you just to make you watch his god-awful Artemis Fowl adaptation. But to me, this movie is poorly edited, specifically for a murder mystery. Even seeing it after the other adaptations, I was still confused at parts. Some examples where I blame the editing for causing needless confusion. There's not one mention of Princess Dragomirov's first name until at the very end when Poirot says it's Natalia out of nowhere as he explains the H on the handkerchief.
Okay, this is really great because I will say this first one was a point that I was like, when that happened in the movie, I was like, what? Yeah. What is her name? Oh, her name's Natalia? I had no idea. Like, I would never... Okay, so I'm glad I wasn't, because some of those things I don't, like when we're taking notes and stuff, when we're watching it, I'm like, I'm sure I just missed it at some point.
Yeah, it's easy to miss details when we're taking notes. The scene of Poirot questioning Dragomirov drops us in the middle of it and starts with the line, and after that. Similarly, we see Marquez say, no, I didn't say I was a chauffeur, but what prompted this is not seen. Poirot mentions Marquez giving Masterman an alibi, and Debenham says Poirot asked Estravados about her dressing gown, but we do not actually see either of those referenced things during the earlier interviews. The conductor states at the start of the second day that he'll move Monsieur McQueen into Monsieur Bouc's compartment, and Bouc slept in another coach, but how? The train is full. There's no added slip coach like in the book where Bouc moves to. And why was this room switch not done the first night? I don't know.
That is a detail that I didn't notice, or so I don't know. The only one of these so far that I was really stuck out to me was the first one. That Natalia thing, I was like, what? Her name's Natalia? I didn't have any idea though that. What?
And last one, during the derailment, Marquez's photos spill, and Poirot references those when determining he was a chauffeur. Later, Poirot references the Countess's luggage tags alongside her passport when revealing her true initials. But we don't see the photos nor the tags clearly earlier and don't get a flashback later. It's like the movie expects us to be Poirot and notice and remember everything. What annoys me more is that none of these are issues in the early screenplay. It's so much clearer. Yes, I even read a draft script out of curiosity. The train and Calais coach room layouts are specified, details pointed out, and frequent flashbacks and intercuts are used. Even Poirot's photo of his friend to whom he laments how he left the police as he did not trust the system. There's still action, more in fact, but at least the early script would have worked as a murder mystery story, if not a Poirot story. It's like Branagh thought that if the movie just keeps moving, the details don't matter. But I shouldn't be questioning if the movie is inventing evidence on the fly during a murder mystery. It makes the atmosphere confused, and Poirot looks like he's just guessing. Try as I might, I cannot separate Poirot from David Suchet. I mean, the man played him for 25 years, so the Branagh interpretation does not really do it for me. The book is clearly superior, and now I want to read more from Agatha Christie.
Fair enough. I will say, I wonder if to some extent what the issues here, and especially with the editing and stuff, because that was mentioned by several people, is I wonder if the studio or somebody was like, this film needs to be under 2 hours.
Yeah, maybe.
And if maybe there's a version of this film that is 2.5 hours or 240 or 3 hours that is, because we know Branagh is not opposed to making long films. I believe one of the Shakespeare adaptations that I was reading,
Hamlet, perhaps.
I think it's Hamlet, was like 4 hours long. So he's not opposed to making long films. So I'm betting or wondering if the studio was like, look, people know what the Murder on the Orient Express, people know the story, they know the twist, the mystery doesn't have to add up perfectly. But if it's 3 hours long, people are going to feel like it drags and they're going to hate it or something. It's like my only thought is that maybe the studio and stuff like had him cut it down from what was maybe originally a more, comprehensive narrative potentially.
Yeah. So our listener poll's winner was The Book with 24 votes to the movie's 5, plus 3 listeners who couldn't decide. Nobody came out swinging for the movie.
No.
It's always interesting to me that you mentioned earlier that the reason we did the 2017 film was because we did a listener poll and we asked you, the listeners, should we do 1974 or 2017? And 2017 did win out.
Yeah.
It was not by an enormous margin, but it did win. And it's always interesting to me then when we do like the follow-up, because inevitably the follow-up is almost always like, why didn't you guys do the other movie?
Yeah.
The other movie is so much better.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where are you people coming from?
Yeah.
Why-
I will say,
where are all the people who voted for the 2017 film right now?
Yeah. I do wonder if part of that isn't, and this is pure speculation, is that even some of the people who vote for the book and maybe come out and talk about how they prefer the book and how they prefer the 1974 movie, if even some of those people, if this is you, by the way, if any of our commenters who came out and was like, hey, I love, and not people who are like, you should have done the 1974 movie. I don't think those people would have voted for the 2017 movie. But people who are like, oh, the 1974 version's better, or just said, oh, the book's better, blah, blah, blah. I think, if I had to guess, we have a large portion of our audience, not a large, but a portion of our audience were people that came over from Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad.
Yes.
And so I think what happens sometimes is people want, and even people who haven't necessarily, I think that's a built-in audience that would want this outcome. But I think that even people outside of that want to hear us tear apart a movie.
Yeah.
Or interested in the idea of hearing us be like, what were they thinking? Like rip apart a movie a little bit. I think that people find that entertaining, especially people who are coming from Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad. And so they're like, when they see these two, they're like, oh, I'm picking the one that I know is like not considered as good. But also in this instance, I think anybody who's voting who doesn't have any idea, like who's just voting who has not seen any of them,
yes,
is gonna
vote for the newer
the one that they know they can watch
Yes.
on Disney or whatever.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And who has people in it that they know and stuff like that. You know, they're not going to want to watch the 1970 version. And so I think you would get I think part of the voting skewed numbers is people who aren't really don't really know that much or is like whatever. But then also I think there's probably a small portion who are like, I'd rather hear them talk about the worst movie because it'll be more entertaining, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know.
I mean, logically, I know all of that, but it is still funny to me to then get the feedback and have so much of the feedback be like,
yeah.
I lament that you that you did not do the other version of the film, and then nobody comes out swinging for the 2017 version.
Maybe
no one.
Yeah, maybe we need to do a thing where we weight votes, where it's like if you're on Patreon, your votes get weighted slightly heavier than, I don't know.
That seems undemocratic.
No, I agree. I'm just wondering if there's like a way to, I don't want to say actual fans, but people who, not actual fans. I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if some not small number of the people who voted for the 2017 version didn't even listen to the episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
At all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But are just like, oh, or at least maybe haven't listened yet. I could be wrong about that. Maybe every single person who voted listened is an avid listener. It's very possible. But if you were scrolling through and there's a podcast that you don't really listen to that much, or, you know, you listen to for a while off and on, but you see they're doing an episode on Murder on the Orient Express and you're like, I've heard of the 2017 one, and you just vote on that without really thinking. I wonder if that's even plays into it to some extent too. I don't know.
No, I'm sure it does.
So I guess that was my point, is that if we found a way to be like, weight the votes of people that we know actually listen to the show more somehow than just general votes. And my way of doing that was, well, patrons obviously listen to the show, but I agree that's not the best way to go about doing that. I was kind of just joking a little bit, but anyways. All right, lots of feedback.
Yeah.
Oof, thank you all so much for all that feedback. We have we're not learning things because we had so much feedback. But we do have our segments where we're going to learn a little bit about the next story we're talking about, which is Drive.
If I drive for you,
You give me a time and a place. I give you a 5-minute window.
anything happens in that 5 minutes and I'm yours, no matter what. I don't sit in while you're running it down. I don't carry a gun. I drive.
All right. Drive is a 2005 novel by American crime writer James Salas, who is also known for the Lou Griffin detective series, which I had not heard of.
No,
but it's like his next biggest thing that he wrote.
Huh.
So maybe you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Drive, the novel, is an expansion of a short story of the same name that Salas originally wrote for the noir anthology Measures of Poison in 2002. So he wrote that short story and then later expanded on it.
Mm-hmm.
A couple reviews. Publishers Weekly called it Salas's, quote, most tightly written mystery to date, worthy of comparison to the compact, exciting oeuvre of French noir giant Jean-Patrick Manchet.
Never heard
Whoever
of
that
Yep.
is.
Yep.
I'm not familiar enough with this genre to know all the name drops.
You know, you're not a big French noir fan?
I'm really not. I don't have anything against it. I'm just not familiar with it. Marilyn Stasio, writing for the New York Times, called the novel, quote, a perfect piece of noir fiction. And Paul Skenazy,
What a name.
right, of the Washington Post, praised the author's, quote, refreshing, even startling prose, and called it, quote, a lovely piece of work that makes you wish some other writers would take lessons from him.
All right.
And I love that so much because I really want to know what
book he had just read.
He's being passive aggressive.
Yeah, what
to,
book he had just
right
read.
there.
Who was catching strays on that one, man?
Entertainment Weekly wrote that the novel, quote, reads the way a Tarantino or Soderbergh neo-noir plays, artfully weaving through Driver's haunted memory and fueled by confident storytelling and keen observations about movie making, low-life living, and, yes, driving.
There you go.
And my last fun fact here, there was not a whole lot to be found about this novel, was that Salas also published a sequel to Drive titled Driven
Nice.
in 2012.
Fantastic. All right, let's learn a little bit more about the film Drive.
So you just moved to LA?
No, I've been here for a while.
What do you do?
I drive for movies.
Is that dangerous?
It's only part-time.
You put this kid behind the wheel. There's nothing he can't do.
Kid, I want you to meet Mr. Bernie Rose. My hands are a little dirty.
So am I.
My husband's coming home.
Where is he?
He's in prison.
There's some guys that want me to do a job for them, and I'm not gonna do it.
What is that you got there? One of those men gave you that? What's the job?
When you get your money, his debt's paid. You never go near his family again.
Drive is a 2011 film directed by Nicholas Winding Refn, known for The Neon Demon, Only God Forgives, Valhalla Rising, and Bronson, among others. The film was written by Hossein Amini, known for Obi-Wan Kenobi, The Snowman, Snow White and the Huntsman, 47 Ronin, and Killshot, among other things. I had to mention Killshot because Killshot was the one other big film before Gone Girl that was filmed in Cape Girardeau, which is the town that we live in. Killshot is...
I'm not familiar with that film.
I am not. I remember hearing about it when I was taking film classes at the university here, because some people, like my professor, worked on it a little bit, or did something on it when they were here. It is from like the early 2000s, I think it was, or the late 90s, or early. I think it's like 2003 or something.
Should we watch it so we can point at familiar landmarks?
There's, I watched the trailer and the clock tower stairs, which everybody is in the trailer. It's got, I think Thomas Jane might be in it. I can't remember. It's got some names in it. It's like it was a relatively big movie. It wasn't like a huge, didn't win a bunch of awards. It wasn't not like Gone Girl, it didn't have like Ben Affleck in it and win like a bunch of Oscars and stuff, or get nominated for a bunch of Oscars. But anyways, I just thought that was interesting because I saw he wrote it and I was like, hey, that's that other movie that they filmed in Cape Girardeau. The film stars Ryan Gosling, Carey Mulligan, Bryan Cranston, Christina Hendricks, Ron Perlman, Oscar Isaac, and Albert Brooks, which is a heck of a cast. The film has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, a 78 on Metacritic, and a 7.8 out of 10 on IMDb, and it was nominated for 1 Oscar for sound editing. The film made $81 million against a budget of $15 million. So, producers on the film, Mark Platt, who's known for Legally Blonde, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, La La Land, Aladdin, and a million other things, and Adam Siegel optioned the novel after they read a review of it in Publishers Weekly that you mentioned earlier. And the driver supposedly intrigued Siegel because the character of the driver apparently intrigued Siegel because, quote, he was the kind of character you rarely see anymore. He was a man with a purpose. He was very good at one thing and made no apologies for it, end quote. The character interested Platt because he reminded him of movie heroes that he looked up to as a child, including people like usually portrayed by Steve McQueen and Clint Eastwood, which those two producers' reasons for making this movie made me go oof. And I was like, is this movie terrible?
I feel like
not terrible, but is this movie like gonna be rough?
I feel like that's not a character that you rarely.
I know. It's lots of baggage. My note was like, there's a lot of weird baggage in both of those statements. Also, I realized, and I knew this, but I didn't know it until this moment, that Mark Platt is Ben Platt's dad. So there you go.
Yep. We've all been talking about Nepo babies lately, right?
Yep. So Hossein Amini said adapting the novel was very difficult because the novel itself is structured non-linearly, and this made it a very tricky structure for him to adapt, and that he found the book to be short, gloomy, and, quote, like a poem, end quote. And so he had a hard time adapting it initially.
As I said, I don't know anything about French noir.
Yeah.
But it doesn't surprise me to hear that it's gloomy and like a poem.
Yeah, that sounds like French noir should be that. Yeah.
Sounds right. It feels right in my soul.
Yeah. The adaptation was announced in 2008, initially with Neil Marshall set to direct, who's known for Game of Thrones, Black Sails, Westworld, Doomsday, and The Descent, among other things. Directed all of those things. Like a handful of episodes of Game of Thrones and Black Sails and Westworld. And then it was initially planned as a vehicle for Hugh Jackman to star. But by 2010, both Marshall and Jackman had left the project. Platt then would go on to contact Gosling, who he was a big fan of, and he had on his list of, quote, people that I have to work with before I quit or die, Actually, I put quotes around that. That's not what he called it, but it was the interview I saw was something along the lines of like he has a list of people he wants to work with before he either gets out of the industry or dies. And Ryan Gosling was one of those people. And Gosling apparently had been wanting to work on an action film and was specifically attracted to this script because he thought it was more character focused than many of the other action movies that he had been, reached out to about. When asked about his impressions on the script, Gosling said, quote, basically, when I read it and trying to figure out who would do something like this, the only way to make sense of this is that this is a guy that's seen too many movies, and he started to confuse his life for a film. He's lost in the mythology of Hollywood, and he's become an amalgamation of all the characters that he admires, end quote. Which to me feels like Gosling has a much more interesting understanding of this character than either of the producers did. Because the producers are like, he's a real man, and he doesn't apologize, and he's like Clint Eastwood. And Ryan Gosling's like, this guy's seen way too many movies, and does like he feels like he's peeling back some layers there.
Yeah.
And the producers were like, he's a man's man who doesn't apologize to anybody because he's good at driving cars, like Steve McQueen. Or I don't know. It's just felt like he actually kind of understood the character, but whatever. Or at least put an interesting spin on the character. So once Gosling signed on, he was a big enough name at this point that he was allowed to select the director of the film. And this is the first time he had ever gotten that being signed on to a film. And he decided he wanted Refn to direct it, saying, quote, it had to be him. There was no other choice. So supposedly, from what I have read, when casting roles in his films, Nicholas Winding Refn does not actually watch casting tapes or have his actors audition. Instead, he meets them and casts them on the spot if he feels they are right for the role. At the time of Mulligan's casting, Refn had not seen In Education, which was like her big breakout role right before this, but his wife was a big fan of the film and Mulligan's performance, and she urged him to cast Mulligan in the film, so he ultimately did. Also, eventually, they were trying to cast Christina Hendricks' character for a while. I think they said they auditioned quite a few different people, including like porn stars and stuff, but nobody like fit the role that they wanted. I don't know if the character in the movie is a porn star. I don't remember. Refn's wife had seen pictures of Christina Hendricks and found her very beautiful, and then recommended her for the role of Blanche in the film. And so to me, it kind of sounds like Refn just kind of casts whatever women his wife is attracted to in his movies.
A king.
That's what it sounds like to me. Like both of the women in this movie that were cast were people his wife was like, you should put them in the movie. He's like, okay. It's what it said on Wikipedia. So I don't know. Thought that was interesting. All right. Getting into some IMDb trivia now. Despite the storyline being, revolving around driving, hence why it's called Drive, Refn has no interest in cars. He doesn't have a driver's license and apparently has failed his driver's test 8 times at the time that this note was written on IMDb. Yep.
That's got to be the parallel parking.
Very famously, Gosling's performance has very minimal dialogue. The film as a whole does, but specifically Gosling's performance. And in the film, the driver only speaks a few words at a time. And in the entire film, the driver speaks 116 lines with a total of 891 words. So if you're wondering, if you've seen it before, and you're like, he doesn't talk much. That's the exact breakdown.
Because he's a man's man.
Yeah, yeah. He's also just an awkward fuck. Like, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but the point is, like, he's just kind of
a weirdo.
Kind of a weird guy, yeah. Okay, I say this, I saw this movie in theaters when it came out in 2011, have not seen it since then, so I remember literally nothing about it. So there's in the film, Ryan Gosling holds the steering wheel in a particularly unusual way where he has his thumbs crooked over the outside of the wheel rather than hooked around the inside in like more of a normal grip. And apparently that's the way stunt drivers tend to drive and hold the wheel so that they avoid breaking their thumbs during impacts in.
Interesting.
Because if you hold it makes sense to me. Small detail apparently that he got from other stunt drivers.
Should I be holding my wheel like that? I don't want to break my
You're
thumbs.
not planning to get into car accidents.
Well,
on the regular,
no, but
like,
I might.
Sure, but okay. Yes, you should. You should hold your thumbs on the outside of the steering wheel. Although the film ultimately ends up being kind of a quiet noir thriller, crime thriller, as we kind of discussed a little bit, the trailer at the time apparently gave the impression that this was a car chase film a la Fast and the Furious. So much so to the point that a woman sued the studio because she went into this movie thinking it was going to be like a fun action, Fast and Furious, and got this like slow boiled noir drama character piece and was like, this, what? No. So I thought that
It's a wild thing to sue over.
I could not find if she won the suit or not. I would imagine she probably did not. So as I mentioned, Oscar Isaac is in this film, and he worked extensively with Refn to further develop his character in the film, because apparently in the book, or in the character he's playing, whose name is Standard, I believe, is kind of an archetypal like ex-convict character, but Oscar Isaac wanted him to be more interesting because he couldn't find anything to connect to in the character when he read the script the first time. So he ends up, Oscar Isaac was the one who ended up adding this backstory about his character wanting to like start a restaurant and stuff like that. So he kind of like contributed a lot to his role. Very famously in this movie, Ryan Gosling pretty much always has a toothpick in his mouth. And apparently this is a tribute to his father, who, quote, always had some kind of stick in his mouth, end quote, which I thought is a weird
That's a weird way to
sentence.
say toothpick.
Always had some kind of stick in his mouth. My thinking is that it was like either a toothpick or like he would have like maybe some straw or like a sucker, or like he had an oral fixation, I guess, maybe. I don't know. So when this film came out, getting into some reviews, it was one of the highest ranked and most featured films on the critics' end of the year top 10 list. It was ranked as the 4th best film of the year behind The Tree of Life, The Artist, and Melancholia on the Metacritic's tally of top 10 films. It was also picked as the best film of the year by Peter Travers of Rolling Stones, Richard Ropert of the Chicago Sun-Times, James Roque of Box Office, Joshua Rothkopf of Time Out New York, Neil Miller of Film School Rejects, Mark Russell of The Oregonian, and a staff critic from Empire Magazine. Getting to some of those specific reviews, Peter Travers of Rolling Stone gave the film 4 out of 4 stars, saying, quote, it's a brilliant piece of nasty business. And Refn is a virtuoso, blending tough and tender with such uncanny skill that he deservedly won the Best Director prize at Cannes. Which, even though this was only nominated for one Oscar for sound editing, yeah, I did see that. I think it was nominated for more stuff at Cannes, and specifically Refn won Best Director at Cannes. So, Movie Line's Stephanie Zacharek rated the film a 9.5 out of 10, complimenting the action and writing that, quote, it defies all the current trends in mainstream action filmmaking. The driving sequences are shot and edited with a surgeon's clarity and precision. Refn doesn't chop up the action to fool us into thinking it's more exciting than it is. End quote. She also admired Refn's skill in handling the violence and the understated romance between Gosling and Mulligan. And finally, Roger Ebert's review of Drive had it ranked as the 7th best film of 2011, according to him. He praised the film, saying, quote, here is a movie with respect for writing, acting, and craft. It has respect for knowledgeable moviegoers, end quote.
Ooh.
Which is an insufferable line, but whatever. Before we wrap up, I want to remind you can support us on Patreon, as we mentioned earlier, but also follow us on social media. We really love getting the interaction. These are our favorite episodes like this, when we do get tons of comments and stuff to talk about. Even though it makes these prequel episodes a little bit longer, it's a ton of fun, and we love getting all that feedback. So follow us on social media. Also, if you do support us on Patreon at that $15 up level, not only do you get your name read every 2 weeks during these prequel episodes, you also get to pick some of the stuff that we do. You get priority recommendation status, and Drive is a patron request from...
It is from Steve from Arizona.
There you go, Steve from Arizona. All right, Katie, where can people watch Drive?
Well, as always, you can check with your local library, or if you still have a local video rental store, you can check with them. You can stream this with ads through Tubi, or you can rent it for $3 to $4 from Amazon, Vudu, Apple TV, YouTube, Redbox, AMC Theaters on Demand, or Spectrum.
There you go. I mean, I say this every time, but I am really looking forward to watching this one again, because it has been a long time. It's been since this movie came out, since I saw it. And I remember quite liking it when it came out, but it was also, again, very different person in 2011 than I am in 2023. We hadn't even met yet.
No.
I was still in college.
We were
both
still
in college, yeah. It was my senior year, I think. My first senior year.
I was dating a dickhead in 2011.
There you go. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw this at the what's that one theater in St. Louis? It's got a weird name. Moolah.
Oh, the Moolah.
I saw this at the Moolah in St. Louis, which is a cool theater. If you're ever in St. Louis and want to find go to a cool movie theater, go check out the Moolah, which I can't remember where. Is it in South City or I don't remember where it is.
I mean, it's downtown, I think.
Yeah, somewhere. I don't remember. But anyways, yeah, it's a cool place to watch a movie. But that's where I saw this. I'm fairly certain because I don't know if this had a super wide release. I can't remember. But anyways, yeah, I'm looking forward to revisiting it and seeing if it holds up and what I think of it now. It's the only Refn film I've seen. I've not seen Neon Demon or the one he followed this up with, which also stars Ryan Gosling, I'm pretty sure, is Only God Forgives, which did not get the same sort of acclaim that this one did. It was like kind of a letdown critic because everybody was like, oh my God, Refn's going to be the next Tarantino. Like this is the best movie that's come out in a decade or whatever. And then he has not matched, at least from my knowledge, he has not lived up to that since Drive came.
It happens, buddy.
Yeah. I mean, look, if you can make one movie that people put as that many people put on their top 10, if you can make one movie, period, do it at all. But like, if you make a movie that a bunch of people put on their best movie of the year list, you did something right. So, I'm interested to check it out. Come back in less than a week's time at this point because we're a little late on this prequel episode, and we'll be talking about Drive until that time. Guys, gals, non-binary pals, everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.